תודה רבה, ברוריה. עד שראיתי אותך מפיקה את האירוע הזה, חשבתי שאני יודעת להפיק אירועים, וחשבתי על איזה דימוי שהוא לא בולדוזר גברי, כי זה לא זה, אבל באמת אני בהשתאות, אני לא ראיתי דבר כזה בחיים שלי, אז תודה על המודל שאת מהווה גם ביכולת שלך לתכלל אותנו, ולהניע אותנו קדימה. תודה מיוחדת ללירון פלג אדומי מ-NCJW שיזמה וחשבה וחיברה, ככל שאנחנו מחברות יותר, אנחנו מגיעות רחוק יותר. תודה רבה ללשכת עורכי ועורכות הדין, אולי הגיע הזמן לשנות את השם, ולשדולת הנשים, שגם דוקטור יופי תירוש וגם אני היינו מעורבות ועדיין גאות להיות חלק מהמורשת של השדולה. תודה רבה לשופטות המופלאות שמכבדות אותנו בדברים החכמים שלהן ומהוות עבורנו דוגמה ומופת. התרבות שלנו מלאה בגיבורים, מלכים וראשי מדינות, לוחמים ואנשי דת. His story שמעלימה את תפקידן של נשים בהיסטוריה האנושית, her story. התרבות הפופולרית ממשיכה לחכות לגיבור, אפילו במישור האישי והזוגי. בוני טיילור שרה I need a hero, והאביר על הסוס הלבן ממשיך להיות חלק מהפנטזיה שנשים מתחנכות לאורה בגילאים צעירים. אבל ההיסטוריה האישית של השופטת גינסבורג היא גם ההיסטוריה של הסדקים ההולכים ומתרחבים בפטריארכיה. החל מכניסת נשים לבית הספר למשפטים בהרווארד, ועד לנסיכות של דיסני שהופכות להיות גיבורות שמצילות אבירים. אחת התופעות המרתקות בקשר לשופטת גינסבורג היא הפיכתה לגיבורת תרבות, לשופטת שמככבת בסרטים, לאייקון שפניה מודפסים על חולצות. התופעה הזו היא ביטוי לצמא הגדול של דור חדש של ילדות, נערות ונשים לגיבורות, לנשים שהצליחו ליצור את הסדקים הללו ולהרחיב אותם עוד ועוד. שלא פחדו מגברים שאומרים להן שהן לא יכולות, מטקסטים משפטיים ואחרים שאומרים להם שהן נחותות, מבתי משפט שלא מבינים מה זה פמיניזם. שתי הדוברות הבאות שלנו מייצגות שני סוגים נוספים של גיבורות, שגם הם מהדהדים בביוגרפיה של גינסבורג לפני מינויה כשופטת. גיבורות שפועלות במסגרת ארגון לשינוי חברתי, וגיבורות שפועלות באופן עצמאי ומוכיחות מה קורה כשכוכבת אחת מעזה. הדוברת הבאה היא גברת ג'ודי רבהאן, מנהלת תחום המדיניות בארגון NCJW, National Council of Jewish Women, שהוא ארגון הנשים היהודיות הוותיק ביותר בארצות הברית. הארגון נוסד ב-1893 לפני יותר מ100 שנים, והוא מונה כיום כ-180,000 חברות, ופועל למען שיפור חייהן של נשים ומשפחותיהן בארצות הברית ובישראל. אחד הפרויקטים המובילים של הארגון בישראל הוא מתן התרומה הנדיבה מאוד שאפשרה את הקמת התוכנית ללימודי נשים ומגדר באוניברסיטת תל אביב שאני עומדת בראשה ב-2001. הארגון תומך בארגונים פמיניסטיים שונים כיום, ובשלוש השנים האחרונות לקח על עצמו גם תפקיד מרכזי בתכלול השדה הפמיניסטי, להגברת שיתופי הפעולה בתוכו והאפקטיביות שלו. ג'ודי רבהאן ממונה על היחסים של הארגון עם הממשל האמריקאי ועל הפעולות שלו במישור החקיקתי. בין היתר היא מייצגת את הארגון בפעילותו למען זכויות אדם וצדק כלכלי, ונגד אלימות נגד נשים וסחר בנשים. היא תדבר על המורשת של השופטת גינסבורג, ועל השפעתה של המורשת הזו על עבודת NCJW.
Thank you, Daphna. It's great to be with you. And as Daphna mentioned, my name is Jody Revham. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Chief Policy Officer at National Council of Jewish Women. I'm going to share a little bit about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life, her legacy, and highlight the differences between Justice Ginsburg and the U.S. Supreme Court's newest justice, Amy Coney Barrett. Justice Ginsburg left an indelible mark on the law. The reach of her work transcends gender, ideology, politics, geography. Indeed, she improved everyone's lives by working for justice and equality for all. It is important, though, that we begin any conversation about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg by understanding how her upbringing impacted her worldview. During Ginsburg's confirmation hearing for the seat on the Supreme Court, she told senators her own story, She talked about her father, a Jewish immigrant, and her mother, barely a second-generation American. Her parents, she said, had the foresight to leave the old country when Jewish ancestry and faith meant exposure to pogroms and denigration of one's human worth. During questioning, she spoke about how country clubs would bar admission to Jews, and she said one couldn't help but be sensitive to discrimination being a Jew in America during World War II. That memory informed what she thought society should be doing to protect other minorities. As she said, it makes you more empathetic to others who are not insiders, who are outsiders. We think of her as the notorious RBG, this giant among legal scholars, looming large and making this huge impact. And of course, all of this is true. But Justice Ginsburg worked in a methodical way, not as a firebrand, but within the system. She pursued a long-term strategy to chip away at discriminatory laws one by one. She saw what was possible. And just as her outsider status impacted her worldview, so too did it really fuel her life's work. She found it difficult to work as a lawyer upon graduation. Few judges and no law firms were willing to accept a woman as a clerk or even a staff member. In the 50s, the traditional law firms were just beginning to turn around on hiring Jews. But to be a Jew, a woman, and a mother to boot, well, that combination was just a bit too much. When she taught at Rutgers University in 1963 to 1972, she was only the second woman on the faculty, and she was paid less than her male colleagues. She also became pregnant with her second child and hid her pregnancy for fear of losing her job. At Columbia in the early 70s, she was the first tenured woman on the law faculty. Yet, she continued to be underestimated like most women at the time. It was at Rutgers, though, that Ruth Ginsburg first became involved in women's rights. It was the late 1960s, and sex discrimination complaints began trickling into the New Jersey affiliate of the American Civil Liberties Union. They were referred to her, Ginsburg said, because, well, sex discrimination was regarded as a woman's job. Justice Ginsburg, important to note, lived in a period when men spoke for women, decided for women, and had made their minds up about women. Yet, she sought to free men and women from the roles that society had assigned to them and to really harness the Constitution to break down the structure, maintained, and really enforce those separate spheres. And she gave us the language that we didn't necessarily have through her legal challenges long before she served on the US Supreme Court. Some of this was really groundbreaking. So in 1971, she filed a brief in a case that went to the Supreme Court in which the law served to reinforce society's oppression of women, and her brief was sort of a case-by-case inventory of all of those ways. And it became famous in legal history as the grandmother brief, upon which feminist lawyers drew for years. She presented 6 cases to the Supreme Court from 1973 to 1978, winning 5 gender equality cases. And she said at the time, well, post-time, I knew that I was speaking to men who didn't think there was such a thing as gender-based discrimination, and my job was to tell them it really exists. There was a case challenging a military regulation that denied husbands of women in the military some of the benefits to which the wives of male soldiers were entitled, on the assumption that a man was not likely to be the dependent spouse, and many, many others. Once she got to the US Supreme Court, Justice Ginsburg also had many impactful decisions. Of course, with that, many memorable dissents. So, in perhaps one of the most important cases of her tenure, United States versus Virginia, it was another gender discrimination case. She wrote the opinion for the court, which held that the exclusion of women from the Virginia Military Institute violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. She wrote, "Those who seek to defend gender-based government action must demonstrate an exceedingly persuasive justification for that action." So any differential treatment, she emphasized, must not create or perpetuate the legal, social, and economic inferiority of women. In the landmark Whole Women's Health v. Hellerstedt case, this one was in 2016, the Supreme Court, with Justice Ginsburg, ruled that 2 abortion restrictions in Texas were unconstitutional because they would shut down most clinics in the state and cause Texans an undue burden on access to safe, legal abortion. In her concurring opinion to the majority, she wrote, "Given the realities that keep abortion out of reach, it is beyond rational belief that HB2, the Texas law, could genuinely protect the health of women, and certain that the law would simply make it more difficult for them to obtain abortions. When a state severely limits access to safe and legal procedures, women in desperate circumstances may resort to unlicensed rogue practitioners at great risk to their health and safety." And to her fiery dissents. In another abortion-related case, Gonzalez v. Carhart, the court, by a 5-4 vote, upheld a federal law criminalizing a particular procedure that doctors used infrequently, but used nonetheless to terminate pregnancies during the second trimester. In his majority opinion, Justice Kennedy said the law was justified in part to protect women from the regret that they might feel after undergoing the procedure. Of course, Justice Ginsburg objected in dissent to the notion that women regret their abortions. She wrote, for which the court concededly has no reliable evidence. The majority's way of thinking, she wrote, reflects ancient notions about women's place in the family and ideas that have long since been discredited. In another really landmark and groundbreaking case, Ledbetter v. Goodyear, the court again to reject a woman's pay discrimination claim on the grounds that it was past the statutory deadline. Justice Ginsburg dissented from the bench, and she said the ball is in Congress's court. Truly fiery language indeed, that Congress did heed, and indeed they did pass a law. One of her best known dissents, however, came in a 2013 case called Shelby versus Holder, in which the 5-4 majority eviscerated the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It is the reason why we have such issues with voter suppression in the United States today. And what she wrote and said in her dissent is, what has become of the court's usual restraint? This is sort of in an ironic reference to conservative calls for judicial restraint among judges and justices. And she ended her pronouncement with these words: "The great man who led the march from Selma to Montgomery and there called for the passage of the Voting Rights Act foresaw progress, even in Alabama. The arc of the moral universe is long," he said, "but it bends toward justice. If there is a steadfast commitment to see the task through to completion, that commitment has been disserved by today's decision." She wrote that the majority had been short-sighted in saying the law was no longer needed. "It is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm," she wrote, "because you are not getting wet." It is not inaccurate to say that we have fair pay, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, laws in place against gender discrimination, and reproductive rights because of Justice Ginsburg. She shattered norms and stereotypes, created a new world for us and our children, and became an icon along the way. However, with her passing, and now Justice Amy Coney Barrett on the court, everything that she fought so hard for is on the line. Justice Barrett thinks very differently about the issues Ruth Bader Ginsburg championed. In fact, based on Barrett's background, her writings, her rulings, it's fair to say that we expect her to undo, if not roll back, many of the rights we enjoy, and frankly, really didn't have to question with Justice Ginsburg on the court. Barrett has criticized Roe versus Wade, the landmark case upholding abortion, and expressed the view that abortion is always immoral. She indicated her desire to overturn Supreme Court precedent permitting states and localities to regulate the ability of protesters to block access to abortion. And this is a law that NCJW supported and helped pass. She has fought against access to contraception, like birth control. She denounced the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts, for his decision to uphold Congress's authority to enact large portions of the Affordable Care Act, which is the United States healthcare law. She cast a deciding vote permitting deportation of a lawful resident who resided in the United States for 30 years. And she has been supportive of the Trump administration's disastrous and harmful immigration policies. Barrett issued a consequential decision, making it easier for students who are held accountable for sexual assault on campus to sue their schools for sex discrimination, literally degrading and diluting the intention of our Title IX law, which prevents gender discrimination. Indeed, she turned the law on its head. She favors gun rights for people with felony records, in conflict with every court that has addressed this issue. Barrett has stated that a justice has a duty to the Constitution and not to precedent, particularly if it presents a conflict for the justice. Importantly, many of our cherished rights, like Roe v. Wade, are based on precedent. And there's so much more. As you might imagine, Barrett's opinions and decisions are really in direct contradiction to Justice Ginsburg, who revered the Constitution and used it as a blueprint to ensure more rights for people, not as a weapon to take them away. With Barrett's particular judicial philosophy, we're worried about everything Justice Ginsburg fought for, her life's work. With Barrett on the court, along with the conservative majority, we at NCJW and many will have to work with Congress to codify our rights into law, healthcare, abortion, equal pay, LGBTQ rights, and so many others. And we'll continue to fight for fair, qualified, and independent judges on our federal courts who are intent on enshrining our rights, not taking them away. It is a tall task, to be sure, particularly as we await undecided Senate results in our most recent election. But NCJW has always been up to the challenge. While NCJW and so many groups fought against Barrett's appointment, galvanizing advocates across the country, we did so to protect the issues we care so deeply about. But to be sure, we also did it to honor Justice Ginsburg's trailblazing endeavors, as well as her dying wish to hold the seat for the next president to fill. I'll leave you with a quote from Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt, an NCJW advocate and rabbi of Justice Ginsburg, who said at her funeral, "To be born into a world that does not see you, that does not believe in your potential, and despite this, to be able to see beyond the world you are in, to imagine that something can be different, that is the job of a prophet. And it is the rare prophet who not only imagines a new world, but also makes that world a reality in her lifetime." That was and is Justice Ginsburg, a prophet. Thank you so much.
הדוברת האחרונה היא גיבורה ישראלית, שפועלת כחוקרת וכאקטיביסטית עצמאית, ביצירתיות, בנחישות, בחוכמה ובמסירות מעוררות השראה ופליאה. דוקטור יופי תירוש היא חברת סגל בפקולטה למשפטים באוניברסיטת תל אביב, ועמיתת מחקר במכון שלום הרטמן, ועד לאחרונה כיהנה כדיקן בית הספר למשפטים במכללת ספיר. היא חוקרת דיני איסור אפליה ומשפט ותרבות. על השילוב בין מחקר והוראה אקדמיים ופעילות ציבורית לקידום זכויות אדם בכלל והמאבק בהדרת נשים בפרט, זכתה בפרסים שונים, ובהם פרס גורני של העמותה למשפט ציבורי בישראל, ואות על שם פרופסור יוסי קטן מעמותת רוח נשית. לאחרונה נמנתה על רשימת 100 המשפיעים של מגזין דה מרקר. כותרת ההרצאה של יופי היא להיות משפטנית פמיניסטית בין הרווארד של שנות ה-50 לירושלים 2020. יופי, בבקשה.